Hello and welcome back to the Recruitment Hackers podcast. I'm your host, Max Armbruster, and today I'm delighted to welcome to the show Robin Linn, who is Senior Director for Creative Recruiting. What is creative recruiting? You're going to find out. For a company called Activision Blizzard, one of the leaders of the leading publishers of games. And Robin, welcome to the show.
Lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. I was raised on video games and on cartoons, and as an adult, I would love to find out what you guys are up to in the adult world, because I'm a big consumer of the output, and you're the factory, you're the impact. So, well, first of all, I need to ask you, Robin, for our audience, maybe not all of them know what Activision Blizzard does. Could you tell us a few words about what your company does?
Sure.
Get an idea of size and the kind of people you have.
We're about a 9,000 seat company, right? So it's a fairly large video game company. We've been around for a number of years. Our game titles that might be most widely known are World of Warcraft, StarCraft, Call of Duty, Overwatch, and we're also associated with King. So if you've played Candy Crush or Crash Bandicoot, those are also titles that we would produce.
Wow. If you add those up, I think it's like half of mankind has played one of your
I would think so, right?
Especially the Candy Crush one. I remember that was like half the planet on that thing. It was like a drug.
Right. Casual gaming, right? It's addictive. It's addictive.
Yeah. Oh, I'm trying to shake away on my old addiction, thinking about it. And well, what a unusual world to be in. We've all left the cartoons behind us and the games behind us, or many of us have, unfortunately, but you managed to stay involved, and we want to know the secret. How did you end up in this industry? Could you walk us back?
Sure. Well, we'll start back with, I grew up in Orange County, California, which was, right next door to Disneyland, and literally right next door. The ashes from the fireworks would fall down upon our roof every summer night. And I think growing up next to a place that's based on animation and based on escapism, it can't help but infect you a little bit. And I fell in love with animation early on because it's the most liberating medium out there. Anything can be turned into an animated character. There's been, Brave Little Toaster took a vacuum cleaner and a toaster and an electric blanket and sent them on a journey. And any number of anthropomorphized animals and other characters have populated animation since its earliest days. And that freedom really intrigued me. I was raised in a very traditional home, so the fact that these characters were rebellious and they were rewarded for being rebellious. You think about the early Mickey Mouse cartoons. He's not the polite little corporate spokesman that he is now. He was quite a little rough and tumble character. And I think that appealed to me really early on. And then I was exposed through Saturday morning movies, right? After the cartoons, you'd have the movies come on that were those that had Ray Harryhausen stop motion animation, the Sinbad movies, Jason and the Argonauts, where you could see what you knew were clearly animated characters, right? I knew that those skeletons weren't real, but they felt real. And to see them interact with live action actors was just so fascinating for me that I got drawn into it. And I was lucky enough in school to have a teacher who gave me a box of clay and said, well, you're not very good at drawing. Maybe you can sculpt. And it turned out I could. And I, spun that up into a career. And I joined Hanna-Barbera cartoons in the late 80s as a maquette sculptor, someone who was sculpting animated characters. This was pre-CG. This is back before CG was even thought of. We'd sculpt the statues that the animators could then hold up and see the character from various perspectives to help them draw. They were drawing ones. And I did that for a number of years. And then CG came along, Jurassic Park and Toy Story, and that kind of spun the industry on its head a little bit. And I left traditional sculpting and went over to a studio called Sony Pictures Imageworks, which was one of the founders of computer-generated imagery, and worked on Anaconda and Contact and then Stuart Little. And while I was there as an artist, I had a manager who came to me and said, you have a background in management, because I had been a bank manager a million years ago. And he said, you're an artist, so we'd like you to be the artist manager. Okay. And part of being an artist manager was recruiting. And when I started, the group was about 25 people. When I left, we were about 320, and loved every minute of it. And went to work for couple of smaller studios to get experience there. And then gaming came along, and I thought, well, I've not done gaming. And it's the interactive version of what I love so much in animation. Let's give that a try. So I went to Riot for a bit, and I left Riot and went to Netflix, because when Netflix comes calling, you've got to see what that circus is about. You've got to go figure out what that is. And then this past fall, the boss I had at Riot, who'd left there and gone to Activision, and he called me up and said, we have a position here recruiting creatives. What do you think? And so I made the jump back.
Awesome. So from that childhood flame, you skipped the part where you ended up working in a bank for a couple of years. Less memorable.
I graduated high school, and unfortunately economic situations were such that I couldn't go to college.
You had to take a real job.
I had to take and I thought banking is a real job. You wear a tie. I remember I was given a gift of a briefcase, right? Because I'm going to carry I don't know what I carried my lunch in it primarily. Yeah. And that was it. But yeah, I did a number of years in banking, and I was pretty good at it. I was about to be promoted to be an assistant vice president of operations at a small bank. And at that same time that was coming together, I got that offer to be a sculptor at Hanna-Barbera Cartoons. And I'm sorry, when that lands in your lap, the banking just kind of fades away. I ran from finance.
It faded away, but it did. You mentioned in your story that they looked at your resume and said, well, you've worked in a bank, therefore you can manage people. It's funny how that association works, because why would somebody who are coming from a bank know how to manage creatives? It doesn't really make that much sense. But I suppose management for some people who are so in love with their craft is considered a chore. And something that, I don't want to deal with the admin type. I don't want to have to deal with people. I just want to be at my desk, making beautiful work. And so, that created a gap in that team. I imagine that's how it played out.
Yeah. Well, I think it was more to the fact that I had written performance evaluations in the past, and nobody likes doing those. So at least Robin knows how to do them. Although, reviewing a bank teller and reviewing an artist are very different animals. And, just the way you speak with artists is very different than you would with an engineer or with, another type of candidate.
Yeah. Well, let's get into that. We're here to talk about recruitment, not cartoons. Damn me. So I would love to get some tips from you on if I want to, obviously when you're Activision or Netflix or even Riot Games, you have a huge brand behind you. Anybody in the industry would know who you are, and your reputation would somewhat precede you. But if you remove the brand, and we can talk about the brand later, just focus on the art of recruiting, which is the mano a mano battle between recruiter and candidate.
Right.
Yeah. How do you appeal to that creative audience? And how do you put together a team with creative people who just want to jump on board? Is it all about getting them excited about the vision of a project? Or is it more about creating the right environment? What do you think how does it differ from, let's say, hiring for a bank?
Well, I think we have to go back to the foundation. But the fact that I came up as an artist before I moved into the recruiting space, I think gives me a little bit of, we'll call it street cred for lack of a better. When you're sitting down and you're talking with an animator about what it's like to work on a deadline, most films are budgeted on a 50-hour week. So there's overtime going into it. There's crunch time coming out the end of it when you might be working 60, 70-hour weeks. If you can sit down and talk with a candidate, and through your language and your sharing of whatever, they understand that you sat in that chair, that it's not abstract. You're selling a product that you're familiar with, that you have used. You've been on a production that's gone haywire. You've been through working on weekends only to have your shot canceled. I think that lends a little bit of, again, credibility to you as a recruiter, as opposed to someone who may have come up through an agency who has been a professional recruiter all of their time in the industry, may not have that understanding. At least that's been my experience. And it also gives you a vocabulary that you can talk to a candidate in such a way that they know their role, right? I'm probably cursed, or it's unfortunate to me that I can't sell an opportunity that I don't have a complete in-depth understanding of. Like if you were to put me in front of an engineering role, I would really struggle at being able to sell that, because I just don't have the in-depth understanding of it. but you can put me in front of art and animation and visual effects and gaming and, and the creative spaces in there. And I'll have either the experience myself or I'll have worked closely with people who have, and be able to have that same vocabulary resonate.
I think whether you're in your industry or others, it's something that we can all get better at. I do hire engineers, and I'm not an engineer myself, and I've often felt that I could get a little bit deeper into it so I could describe the environment better. I think, if you're a recruiter, you're not necessarily going to maintain that relationship post the point of hire, but you are that first impression. And so, to sound familiar enough.
It's interesting you say that, because I still keep in contact with people that I recruited 25 years. Social media has made it so much easier now, but it's rare that a week goes by that I don't exchange an email or a text or something with people that I've hired early in my career and early in their career. And we've both kind of advanced up. We can go reach back and share war stories or whatever. I think because, recruiting, for lack of a better term, is an intimate process. You get to know somebody very well over the weeks you may spend with them, because you're talking about where their challenges are. If you're a good recruiter, you don't go in saying, well, this is the great stuff about the candidate. You have to go into your hiring manager and say, these are the challenges. This is where this person's going to need to support. And the only way you can find that is by having really in-depth conversations with that candidate and developing trust. And, and on top of that, the financials, right? You're going into that knowing what that person makes for a living, which is, in many cases, their significant other may not even know that. So you develop, a friendship is probably, too strong of a word, but you should develop a relationship with these candidates that certainly is the kind of the bedding for a friendship. It's a bedding for a relationship that will spawn up out of that.
You need to bleed a little bit and worry a little bit about this is going to fit. Otherwise, this is going to hurt me, my relationship, and we'll suffer from it. Whereas, in the high volume recruitment space, it is a one-time interaction. So it's a very different world.
Yeah. So we were talking before we started recording. The talent pools that I'm working within are very, very finite. If we're talking about Academy Award winning visual effects supervisors, there's 60, maybe 70 of those on the planet. You can't, I can't letter bomb all 50 of them with a templated email and expecting a response back from any of them, because they'll delete it before they even go. So you have to have the ability to understand what these people have done, what their background is, what the connective tissue is. Who do you know who knows them that can introduce you? It becomes much more of a social game at some level than just reaching out with a cold email.
The Netflix culture made a lot of noise for emphasizing accountability and performance in the early days. I haven't heard that much about it since. I suppose that would resonate relatively well with creatives, because there are also very autonomous people who want to get things done and who have a drive for accomplishments, a strong drive for personal accomplishments. Would you say that's a fair statement, or that people kind of rejected the corporatism?
Well, I think we can't paint with too broad of a brush. This is appropriate for everyone. My experience with the Netflix culture was that it was a great kind of litmus test, right? Every call that I had when I was working there for the 3 years I did started off with, have you read the Netflix culture memo? What are your thoughts on it? And also sharing that there were things that were written on that document that was like, oh, I don't know if I agree with that. I don't think anyone can lockstep in with all, I think there's 52 points that are made on that document. And it was a great opportunity, like a conversation icebreaker, to talk about where they didn't align. It's easy to, it's one thing, and I'm sure you've experienced this recruiting as well. At some point with certain levels of candidates, you stop talking about the benefits of the job and you start talking about the challenges, right? You don't say, oh, this is the best place in the world to work. You start saying, this place has got some challenges. We're broken, because that's why we need you to come in. That's why we need you to help fix us. That's for a certain type of candidate, the fact that everything is running smoothly is like red meat, to a tiger. It's like, oh, I want that. I want to come in. I want to leave a mark. I want to make a stand. I want to make a difference. I want to feel like I've contributed. And if the workplace is seamless, there's no opportunity for it to do that. So the more challenging an environment is, the more intriguing and interesting that will be to the right level of candidate.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the recent challenges of your industry where my mental image of the creatives and the developers, everybody's living in a basement, drinking Mountain Dew under green neon lights and having sleepless nights of coding and gaming. I'm sure it's not exactly like that, but that doesn't sound very COVID friendly.
No. And I think what this situation has taught us, especially in animation and in gaming as well, is that the artists no longer have to be in-house, right? They can operate from home and produce work safely and without there being too big of a hit on our production cycles. For recruiting, this means that our talent pools are no longer geographically locked, right? I'm no longer looking for people who are necessarily in the Los Angeles basin or in proximity to our studios and the campuses. It opens the world up, right? Especially if you're looking for people to come in and do contract work where we have, we might need 7 or 8 paintings done, or we might need character design or prop design. All of a sudden, we can start looking on a global scale as to where those people are located and track them down. And this is when it becomes all important to candidates to brand themselves. And we started off this conversation talking about branding. Candidates really have to be forward facing. They really have to put themselves out there, and they can do that. It's so much easier now than it was in the older days when prior to the web, where you had to send around portfolios to show your work. Now you can create a website. You can utilize social media channels like TikTok and Instagram to put your artwork out there. You can follow recruiters. Recruiters have Instagram accounts. You can find them. You can follow them. You can interact with them. You can share your work with them. Ask for feedback. They won't necessarily give it, but it's always, always good to ask.
Is there unemployment in your space? Are there animation artists and game developers that are sitting on the bench?
Always, right? Part of that is because we're a finite industry, but schools keep graduating students. And, that's just, I don't know who, in the best of years, we could absorb everybody who's looking to get into the industry. It just doesn't happen. There was a stat years ago, and it's probably still the same, that there were more professional football players in the NFL than there were professional working animators. And that's a fairly accurate parallel, because the desire to do something, the desire to be an animator, the desire to be an artist, the desire to be a game developer does not guarantee you employment in that space.
Right. You need, I don't know what you need. What do you need?
Talent, right? You have to have the talent to back it up. You can want to be an actor, and you can study all the lines, and you can memorize everything, and you can know where to stand and where the lighting is. But if the performance isn't there, you're never going to be an actor.
So how do you measure that? Are there some exercises you can submit for the younger crowd? We'll see, if you get a little bit older, you can see their professional output, but for the younger crowd, are there ways for you to evaluate that talent that you can, that could be applied by others?
Certainly. I mean, the web has made all this so much easier, because you can type in to Google animators reels, or if you're a prop designer, professional prop designers worksheets, whatever it is, you can type it in there and find examples online of what good looks like. And odds are you can find somebody who's willing to teach you, right? Or you can find tutorials that someone's already completed for you. Then it's up to you to do the legwork. We're not necessarily concerned about where you go to school or where you have a degree or if you have an advanced degree. We're more concerned if you have talent and you can do the job. And there's a million different pathways to get to that result. You don't have to just go through a formal education.
Those reels that are online, that's going to be the basis for your evaluation. There's going to be a first interview, get to know each other, and then afterwards, somebody's going to evaluate your work on its creative merits.
Yeah, normally what we do when we're looking for an artist is we'll go onto Instagram or we'll go onto YouTube or any of these media channels, and we'll just start vetting art. We'll start looking, we'll put in a search engine, right? So we're going to search for you. So if you create a profile, you're going to want to use keywords that we can find. That's how we're going to find you. So you can put in animation, you can put in character design, you can put in prop design. Build those out so you're easily searchable. And we're going to, gather those up into a database. We're going to then go through that database and vet candidates. And it's one of the sad realities that just the mechanics of the process of vetting candidates means we only look at your artwork for maybe 10 to 15 seconds, right?
Yeah.
You have to make a fantastic first impression because you won't get a second opportunity to make that work. If we like your work, we'll watch it longer. We'll look at it longer. If we don't like your work, if your work is really bad, we'll also look at it a bit longer, but for a different. But that's, 10 to 15 seconds is all you get. We'll boil those lists down. I think the ratios that I'm comfortable speaking about, for every 50 websites or 50 reels or 50 portfolios we look at, we may find one that we advance.
Okay, 2.5% conversion rate.
Right.
I've seen worse.
Yeah.
And you get to browse Instagram all day. That sounds like, a millennial's dream job.
Yeah, but I'm not looking at cat videos necessarily, or,
It's another robot or another monster.
So we'll gather those up. We'll take those to the supervisor in that particular discipline and ask them, what do you think? And out of that list of 10 or 15, we may get one or two that they like. And then we'll do a phone screen. We'll grab a phone call with the candidate and just talk to them and try and get a feel for who they are. We've already assessed craft. We know you can do the work. Then it's about who they are as a candidate. Are they brave? Are they timid? Are they, just all those things you start looking for, because we're casting, right? That's what we're doing at that point. We're trying to see, like, what's the deficit on the team that I'm looking to fill? And how does this person fit into that? Candidates need to understand that, especially first time emerging talent, what we often hear from emerging talent when we talk to them is, I want to be a sponge. I just want to come in there and I just want to learn. And I just want to, just be like, I just want to take everything and just take it all in.
Yeah.
And that's great. But what are you bringing, right? What are you bringing to it? If I'm making this meal over here, right? What's your addition to the menu? How are you going to make us better by your presence? And that can be in your talent, that can be in your feedback, that can be in your personality. It's a number of factors that they bring, or they can bring to the team to improve that. It's not just their ability to create, especially with emerging talent. We hire on hope primarily. We've seen that you can do it. We don't know if you can necessarily do it again, but we hope you can.
In engineering, there are some fields that are extremely hot. And if you get in on it early, you will find job, you will find work. If you were one of the first developers to build on AWS, and it took off, I'm sure you would find job in that field. If you're one of the first developers building chatbots, your salary would go up by 50% in the first year, etc. There must be still some pockets of great gaps, where if somebody's done that, then they get picked up.
The less glamorous jobs, right? Everybody wants to be an animator because animators are actors. And, it's performance based. It's very sexy to see your character come to life on the screen. But there are a number of disciplines that, and I won't even say support, I almost did, and I caught myself, that partner with animators to make that performance possible, right? Character riggers that actually take a static model and input the controls that allow it to move, that allow that animator to drive that performance. That's a great career path for somebody who may not have the acting chops. They may not make the best acting decisions, but they're more technically minded and they have a sculptural mind. They understand that when you bend a finger, this is what happens to the skin, and they can duplicate that using technology. People who are proficient in a software called Houdini, which builds visual effects, right? All the visual effects you see out there. All the new kind of AR and VR technology. So if you can animate or you can work and build visual effects in that new space.
Does that Houdini thing an arm and a leg?
Pretty much.
Pretty much.
Pretty much. Oh, but like real time, we can't find real time visual effects artists. That's always an area that just drives us crazy. So the further, if you can find joy in doing something that someone else doesn't want to, you will never be unemployed. And I think that holds true in our industry as well.
Yeah, those are good last words. But before we part ways, Robin, I have a question I always ask, and it's kind of shitty of me to end on a sad note, but I like to ask about hiring mistakes made in the past and what we can learn from them. And so I'd ask you to think about one person, without giving a name, one person in particular, where you made a mistake and it blew up in your face and in their face, and what that mistake was. Could you walk us back?
Immediately, I think every recruiter's got like a handful of these, like, oh yeah, that one. I'll start with this. If you love chocolate, it doesn't necessarily mean you want to work in a factory that makes chocolate, right? You have to be able to distance yourself from the process of making the product to what the actual product is. And I remember sitting down with a candidate and his significant other who came into the interview with us. And, that's fine. This is a business where, the animator is going to be away from home quite a bit working on these projects. And I remember her saying in the course of the interview to me, oh, I'm so happy he's done with animation school because the hours were so long and now he'll just have a regular 9-to-5 job. And I was young in my recruiting career, and I should have just went, wait, let's talk about that, because that's not the case. And I didn't, and we hired him anyway. And I think the first time he went on a 60-70 hour week, it may have put some strain on their relationship that I, felt in some way responsible.
Okay. Yeah. We all put our head in the sand sometimes, and we hear something and we just brush it over. That'll be fine.
Yeah, that's a ghost that haunts me. That's one of those 3 a.m. like, God.
Well, if their relationship survived it, then it'll be stronger for it.
So the good news is I've hired him subsequently a couple other times, and they're together and have kids, and everything's wonderful.
Great.
Man, you do learn from those experiences never to just skip over something lightly in effort to make a hire.
Well, it was very kind of you to come and share with us the wonderful world of gaming and studios and animation. And on the off chance that a Houdini developer here's our conversation, where can you be reached? Can people connect with you on Instagram, or what's the best way to connect?
LinkedIn. I'm old school, right? My Instagram is filled with gardening pics and pictures of my grandchildren, but LinkedIn is the best way to get hold of me, and I try to respond to everybody on there. This is my New Year's resolution this year, was to be very active on LinkedIn, so I try to post something every couple of weeks that's related to recruiting and getting a job in animation and sharing whatever I picked up over my 30 years.
Well, thanks for sharing with our audience, Robin.
And, my pleasure.
Good luck with hiring people from all over the world and making the dreams of these young animators come true.
It's the most fun I've ever had. It's just been the most rewarding career to do that, right? I feel very, very fortunate to have had the years I've had.
That was Robin Linn, who is in charge of creative recruiting for Activision Blizzard, and who reminded us of how important it is and how useful it can be for a recruiter to have sat in the shoes of the candidate and to know their industry, their jargon, and so on. It does make everything go better and the trust build faster. So a good reminder for all of us recruiters out there to really know our industry deeply. Hope you enjoyed it. I certainly did, and you'll be back for more. Please follow us on the Recruitment Hackers podcast and share with friends.